Well, in the days before internet and in the days before 900 numbers, Paul Tremaine came up with an idea to have race results on the telephone. And in order to do this, he enlisted a lot of people to help him, and his first was Andy Main. And that's where he came up with the moniker Tremaine, the combination of his name and Andy's. They used to travel around in an old Volkswagen minibus, but it was well known at each and every racetrack. It was later replaced by a Gremlin, which you can see out front. I had the pleasure of hosting the Hartford number, and Rick Mariscal, who has the car, hosts the Providence number when that was in vain, and John Kershaw did Manchester and several other people. It was interesting because sometimes we used to answer the phone ourselves when people were looking for results from Martinsville, and they wouldn't expect a human voice, and it would really cause some problems. It was sort of like Kramer on Seinfeld when he said, "Why don't you just tell me what movie you want to see?" We'd ask them who their favorite driver was, and it really threw them a curve. They'd be stumbling more than I am here. Paul had some other nicknames: Checker Flag Baldy, which is obvious; Paul Tremaine, because he used to carry assorted food products in the back of that Gremlin that you don't know whether they were edible or enshrined there. I remember one time I got some potato chips that actually bent. I thought it was beef jerky, but I was wrong. Paul did most of this out of his own pocket, and can't even imagine how much he had to put into it money-wise out of his own, and I'm sure he'll never tell you. But before I got into auto racing, I worked for the phone company. And the installers in the Willimantic office used to tell me about this house. And it looked like a explosion happened at a macaroni kitchen, that there was wire everywhere. And somehow Paul knew how to get it to work. And in those days, the remote answering machines were in their infancy. And he test drove, I would say probably, I don't want to exaggerate, but I'd say probably hundreds of answering machines that either worked or failed, or we're talking 1970s technology. And I'd hear the thing up in my office in my house. He'd be on there changing the message at 3 o'clock in the morning because he was having a hard time getting race results. But I think we all appreciated what he did for auto racing, and I'd like to call him up now. Paul Tremaine, or Paul Trowbridge, your real name. I think we can use that now. Come up and get your reward.
Thank you, Danny. Well, what can we say? I'm going to be very brief. My legs will not maintain my upper body very long. Of course, I could sit down in a chair and probably talk to the rest of the afternoon, and then we'd all miss that Patriots game. But I won't. I'll be very brief. I had come up here with a thought in mind that would reveal all my secrets, what my name was and who I did and what I did. And within the last week or so, all my secrets have been resolved or divulged, so there's nothing for me to say. What can I say, you all? If you've read your program, if you've read Speedway Scene, and by the way, I would like to thank Val Lesueur for maintaining my deadbeat subscription to Speedway Scene all these years. I still, every Thursday, I get a Speedway Scene in my mailbox, and I read it. However, some of the names are beginning to change. In the little article, it said about some of the women in my life. I'm glad my wife never knew about them, but Peggy Goodrow, and Peg Summers, and many, many more used to call up when I'd be answering the phone, and I enjoyed talking to them. Joanne Bouchard, Ronnie's sister. I don't know whether she's still Joanne Bouchard or Joanne something or other, but Joanne and I used to talk quite a bit. I want to thank the selection committee for selecting me. It's a real honor. I doubt really that I deserve it at this point. Maybe 3 or 4 years from now, I'd have been down on the list low enough, but I still feel there's many, many people in all facets of the program who have done so much more than I have. I feel rather almost ashamed to be accepting this award, but I certainly do appreciate it. And I appreciate all of you folks who have helped me out through the years. I'm not going to try to name them because I'll surely forget them. I sharing my table with Lou Young, and he's always talking about senior moments. Well, I have sometimes senior hours and even sometimes senior days. And I would probably ask if those who may have called CFA would ever raise their hand, but if nobody raised their hands, I'd be totally and completely dejected, so I won't do that. I know you did, Mike, once. I want to thank Joe Golis, who's down at the table with me. Joe Golis is my right-hand man in many ways. He drove that gracious gremlin thousands and thousands of miles flawlessly, never had an accident. One accident we had, we were rear-ended in Willimantic by a guy that fell asleep. We stopped for a traffic light. We were rear-ended, but that was of no consequence. So I want to thank Joe publicly. And I wish he'd come up and say a few words, but he's very bashful all of a sudden. Also at my table is John Potter from Willimantic, who was a Riverside Park racer years ago. And I understand we also had the honor of sharing the table with Bob Blair's sister, right? And I appreciate meeting her. I appreciate and I'm thankful for all the people who have spoken to me even either last night or today. So once again, I want to thank the selection committee, and I hope in 5 years I'll be back here again to meet you all, maybe even less. Thank you.